We're here in the Cavan County Library at the Great War Roadshow. We have Miles Dungan and Pete
from Pete Sheelan's from the Flanders Museum, and myself, Dermot Bolger.
Dermot, there's a lot written about the First World War, they called it the Great War. How much of this now, that with hindsight, was factual and how much is mythical?
Well, obviously every novel is fictional in the sense of Sebastian Barry's great novel A Long, Long Way, which you're going to read from shortly tonight, or Jennifer Johnston's Jen Johnston's How Many Miles to Babylon, or any novel about an historical event is fictional in the sense that it has to create a parallel imaginative world to contain the truths of the real world. So I mean, any novel is fictional, but I think that in the last 10 or 15 years there have been a huge amount of books written about the Irish experience and about all the other experiences of different nationalities of the war, and that is very, very factual, and huge amount of research has gone on and huge amount of material has been uncovered. So I think more and more we're coming to a full understanding of the totality of what happened in Europe between 1914 and 1918.
So while some of it was very detailed and very gruesome, people are now becoming to accept what is war and judging it in that sense, in that you can't judge it against normal society.
Well, I think you're dealing with an exceptional event, a war that wasn't like any other war, a war that people imagined would be short-lived as wars were, and a war that became literally entrenched in trenches, and was the ending of the 19th century, 14 years after the 20th century began, the ending in terms of the concepts of what constituted war, of what constituted heroism, of how wars were fought, and suddenly you had a new form of warfare that came out. People would be much more expert on the matter than myself to describe what actually happened in that war, but I don't think it was a war that the people who blindly went into it in 1914 imagined it would become.
Pete, the In Flanders Museum is deemed to be a major source of reconciliation, but in war, as it's happening, there's very little reconciliation. That can happen later, but maybe you'll be able to give us some of the rationale behind how the conflict arose and how it really polarised everybody within Europe.
Yes. Well, to start with the first bit of your question, the reconciliation, I think a century on, is still very, very important. We still see today that at the start of the commemorations, we still quite act with nation states commemorating, rather than with the recognition that this is a big European disaster that happened to the whole continent and indeed the world very soon after that. And I think it's time that a century later we start to see that as the first part of a big European civil war that we had, and which was then continued, of course, during the Second World War. So I think that part of reconciliation is still very important. To come to the second part of your question, I think that's even more difficult to answer, because what you see is that the origins are not at all just with the shooting of the Austrian Crown Prince in Sarajevo on the 28th of June of 1914. That was only like the little anecdote that was needed to start a conflict which was already going on for many decades, and which eventually had to erupt because of the fact that those nation states, Britain, Germany, France, Russia, were heavily militarized and were also trying to gain power by using that military force. in one way or another. And in trying to bring that together in alliances and so that automatically everybody would be involved was calling over the whole world the fact that the most industrial states in the world were now fighting or were going to fight with each other. And like Dermot said earlier, wars until then were very short-lived because they had very limited means and very limited power. Now this was the most industrial economies in the world who were able to bring in force after force, and you had an industrial capacity, yet with a notion of a 19th century war still. And that is what caused the big disaster. That caused, indeed, the millions of lives being lost for the very first time in human history.
That's fantastic, and unfortunately we have to conclude the debate, but this is an ongoing process, and no doubt we'll be able to come back to the very interesting debate that takes place as around the First World War.
Thank you.
Thank you.